Elena Vega's blood froze in her veins as the janitor slid a resume across her desk. Oxford education, 7 years at MI6, corporate espionage specialist, revealing that the man who had been emptying her trash for 17 months knew more about her company's darkest secrets than she did. The CEO's fingers trembled as she realized this invisible man now held her entire career in his hands, along with evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud orchestrated by the mentor she had trusted completely. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Victor Reese moved through the 53rd floor of Meridian Tower with practiced invisibility. The janitorial cart's squeaky wheel announced his presence long before he rounded each corner, giving executives time to finish their conversations, straighten their postures, or simply pretend he wasn't there at all. 17 months he'd worked at Meridian Enterprises, and in that time, he'd become less a person and more a function. A cleaning service with legs that emptied trash bins and polished reflective surfaces after hours. Tonight was different. Tonight, Victor's heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed his cart past the row of darkened executive offices. The building had emptied hours ago, the daytime workforce replaced by security guards and night shift janitors like himself. Only one office still glowed with warm light at the end of the hall, the corner office belonging to Elena Vega, CEO of Meridian Enterprises. Victor checked his watch. 10:47 p.m. The board meeting was tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp, and according to every credible source within the company, Elena Vega would be removed from her position by 9:30. The decision had already been made in back-channel conversations, executive lunches, and golf course negotiations. The official vote was merely a formality. He stopped his cart outside her office. Through the glass wall, he could see her hunched over her desk, surrounded by financial reports and projections, desperately searching for a solution that didn't exist. Her normally impeccable appearance had frayed around the edges, hair falling loose from its severe bun, jacket discarded over a nearby chair. Victor had never seen the notorious Iron Lady of Meridian look so human, so vulnerable. This was his moment, the moment he'd been waiting for since he first infiltrated the company. He knocked softly on the glass door. Elena Vega looked up, her face registering momentary confusion at the interruption. "Come in," she called, her voice muffled through the glass. Victor pushed the door open. "Sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Vega. Just need to empty your trash." She waved dismissively, already returning to the documents spread across her desk. "Go ahead." He moved efficiently, emptying the small wastebasket into his larger bin, while his eyes quickly scanned her desk. Projected losses for the third quarter, restructuring plans, a half-finished letter of resignation. "Will that be all?" Elena asked, not bothering to look up. Victor took a deep breath. "Actually, no, Ms. Vega. I have something I need to discuss with you." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Close up, Victor could see the dark circles beneath them, the fine lines of exhaustion etched around her mouth. At 38, Elena Vega was the youngest CEO in Meridian's 70-year history, and tonight she looked every year of the fight it had taken to get there. "I'm extremely busy," she said. Her tone clipped. "Whatever it is, please take it up with facilities management." "It's about tomorrow's board meeting," Victor replied quietly. The change was instantaneous. Elena's body tensed, her expression hardening into the mask that had earned her the Iron Lady moniker. She stood, all 5'6" of her radiating cold authority. "How would you know anything about tomorrow's board meeting?" Her voice was dangerously soft. "The same way I know that Harrison Blackwood has secured the votes to force you out," Victor said, maintaining eye contact. "The same way I know that he's been deliberately tanking your European expansion to make your leadership look incompetent. The same way I know that there's a shell company in Malta that's been siphoning funds from your Singapore division for the past 14 months. Elena's face drained of color. "Who are you?" "Right now, I'm your janitor," Victor said. "But I think you should take a look at this." He reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. A resume printed on heavy stock paper. She didn't move to take it. "If you're blackmailing me..." "I'm not," Victor interrupted. "I'm trying to help you. Please." Just look. Something in his tone must have convinced her. She took the paper with obvious reluctance and unfolded it. Victor watched as her eyes moved down the page, widening incrementally with each line. The resume was brief but devastating. An Oxford education, 7 years at MI6, 5 at a private intelligence firm that specialized in corporate espionage, and a list of credentials that had no business belonging to someone pushing a cleaning cart. Vincent Romano, she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. That's your real name? One of them, he admitted. I've had several over the years. Elena sank back into her chair, the resume still clutched in her hand. Why are you here? Who sent you? No one sent me. I chose you. Why would a man with your background choose to become a janitor at my company? Victor leaned against her desk, dropping the subservient posture he'd maintained for months. Because janitors are invisible, Ms. Vega. They move through secure areas without question. They overhear conversations no one bothers to hide. They handle discarded documents that no one thinks to shred. You've been spying on my company, she stated flatly. I've been investigating a very sophisticated embezzlement scheme that originated within your executive team, he corrected. G1 that's been engineered to not only steal from Meridian, but to destroy your career in the process. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Harrison, Victor nodded. Harrison Blackwood, your CFO, is certainly involved, but he's not the architect. He's not clever enough. Then who? Your board chairman, Edward Klein. The shock that registered on her face told Victor everything he needed to know. Edward Klein had been Elena's mentor, the man who had championed her rise through the company, who had personally nominated her for the CEO position 3 years ago. That's impossible, she whispered. Edward wouldn't. He not only would, he did, Victor cut in. And I have proof, comprehensive proof, that will not only save your job tomorrow, but will likely send several members of your executive team to federal prison. Elena stared at him, her analytical mind visibly processing his claims, weighing possibilities, calculating risks. What's your angle? What do you want in return? Victor smiled slightly. Smart question. I want a job. Your head of security. Your current chief is either incompetent or complicit. Either way, he needs to go. That's all. A job. Her skepticism was palpable. That and a percentage of whatever funds we recover from the embezzlement scheme. Consider it a finder's fee. Elena stood again, moving to the window that overlooked the glittering city below. For nearly a full minute, she said nothing, her reflection in the glass revealing a face locked in careful consideration. Why should I trust you? She finally asked, turning back to face him. How do I know you're not working for Harrison or Edward, trying to trap me in some kind of counter move? Victor reached into his pocket again and withdrew a small USB drive, placing it on her desk. Because I'm giving you this now, not at the board meeting. It contains everything you need: bank transfers, shell company documentation, recorded conversations, emails. Review it tonight. Verify what you can. If you decide I'm lying, I'll be gone by morning and you'll never see me again. Elena picked up the drive, examining it as if it might explode in her hand. And if I decide you're telling the truth, then meet me at 7 a.m. tomorrow in the executive lounge, and we'll finalize our strategy for the board meeting. Victor straightened his janitor's uniform. For what it's worth, Ms. Vega, you're a good CEO. What's happening to you isn't fair, and it isn't your fault. But corporate warfare rarely is fair, and I think you know that better than most. He moved toward the door, resuming his slightly hunched janitor's posture. Wait, Elena called. How did you get this information? Even if everything you say is true, these people are careful. They wouldn't leave evidence just lying around. Victor paused at the door, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Ms. Vega, people reveal their secrets in 2 circumstances: when they believe no one is watching, and when they believe the watcher doesn't matter. For 17 months, I've been the man emptying their trash, cleaning their offices, and blending into the background of their lives. Trust me with your company for one more day, and I'll show you exactly how invisible a person can become when others choose not to see them. Eleanor didn't leave her office until 3:14 a.m. The contents of the USB drive had kept her riveted to her desk, each file more damning than the last. There were audio recordings of Harrison Blackwood discussing offshore accounts with Edward Klein in a hotel bar in Geneva. Email chains using coded language about restructuring assets that, when matched with financial transfers, painted a clear picture of systematic theft. Most disturbing was a recorded conversation from Edward's lake house, where he candidly discussed how Elena's meteoric rise had been orchestrated precisely because they needed a competent fall person when the scheme eventually came to light. "She's perfect," Edward had said in the recording. "You're brilliant enough to keep the company stable while we extract what we need, but ultimately expendable. A woman, a minority. The press will devour her downfall. No one will look past her to see what really happened." Those words had struck Elena like physical blows. She'd always known the corporate world could be ruthless, but this level of calculated betrayal from her mentor left her feeling hollow. For 3 years, she'd thrown herself into the CEO role, working 18-hour days, sacrificing her personal life, all while believing she'd earned her position through merit and Edward's genuine belief in her abilities. It had all been a lie. Now, standing in her apartment's shower, letting scalding water wash over her, Elena struggled to process the emotions churning inside her: rage, humiliation, and beneath it all, a cold, clarifying fury. By the time she stepped out and wrapped herself in a towel, her decision was made. At precisely 7 a.m., Elena walked into the executive lounge wearing her sharpest suit, hair perfectly coiffed, makeup flawless, armor for the battle ahead. Vincent was already there, transformed from the slouching janitor she'd known as Victor. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that suggested money but not ostentation, his posture straight, his presence commanding in a way she'd never noticed before. "You clean up well," she remarked, pouring herself coffee from the private executive bar. "So do you," he replied, a hint of approval in his voice. Did you review the files?" "Every last one." Elena took a seat across from him, their isolation in the executive lounge guaranteed at this early hour. "I made some calls to verify certain aspects. It's all true, isn't it?" "Yes. They've stolen approximately $42 million over the past 14 months. The Singapore division was chosen specifically because you've never visited it personally, making it easier to fabricate reports and manipulate the numbers." Elena nodded, sipping her coffee. "Edward recommended against my traveling there, said it would signal distrust in the local management. A convenient manipulation." "Tell me something." Elena leaned forward. "How did you know to investigate Meridian specifically? What brought you here?" Vincent considered her for a moment. "Professional curiosity. Initially, I tracked patterns of corporate fraud. Meridian's financial reports showed subtle inconsistencies that most people would miss. Then I learned about you, the unexpected CEO appointment, your rapid rise. It fit a pattern I've seen before. So I was predictable," Elena said bitterly. "They were predictable," Vincent corrected. "You were just convenient for them." Elena's jaw tightened. "And what happens today? I walk into that board meeting and expose everything." "Not quite." Vincent reached into his briefcase and withdrew a tablet. "If we simply expose them, they'll deny everything, claim the evidence is fabricated, and drag this into a legal battle that could take years. Meridian's stock would plummet in the meantime. You'd likely still lose your position. Then what do you suggest?" "A trap." Vincent's eyes gleamed with professional enthusiasm. "We need to make them incriminate themselves in front of witnesses." He slid the tablet across to her, displaying a presentation that outlined his plan in meticulous detail. As Elena read through it, her eyebrows rose incrementally. "This is audacious," she finally said. "It's effective," Vincent replied. "I've done similar operations before. The key is controlling the flow of information. We need to make them believe they're winning until the exact moment they realize they've lost. And this part here," Elena pointed to a section of the plan, "where you suggest I appear to concede to Harrison's takeover attempt. You really think they'll believe I'd surrender so easily?" Vincent's expression softened slightly. "That's where your acting skills come in. You need to channel all that fury you're feeling right now and transform it into defeated resignation. The more convinced they are of your capitulation, the more boldly they'll move." Elena studied him for a long moment. "You've been watching me for 17 months. Do you think I can pull this off?" "I wouldn't be here if I didn't," he replied simply. She nodded. Decision made. What do you need from me before the meeting?" "Access to the boardroom's AV system and your personal authorization to bring in some equipment under the guise of a security upgrade." Elena reached into her purse and withdrew her security badge, sliding it across to him. "This will get you anywhere in the building. I'll call down to security and let them know you're authorized to make whatever changes you deem necessary." Vincent pocketed the badge with a nod. "One more thing. Can you delay the start of the meeting by 30 minutes? I need time to set everything up." "Consider it done." Elena stood, smoothing her suit jacket. "I'll send a message that I'm running late due to an urgent call with our Tokyo office." As she turned to leave, Vincent called after her softly. "Ms. Vega," she paused, looking back. "When we're in that boardroom, no matter what's said, no matter how personal the attacks become, remember that it's all theater. Every insult, every condescending remark, it's all just evidence we're gathering." Elena's expression hardened into the mask she wore for her toughest negotiations. "Mr. Romano, I've been enduring condescension from men like Edward Klein my entire career. The difference is, today I finally get to make them pay for it." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Elena rescheduled the meeting for 9:30 a.m., conducted a series of routine calls to maintain appearances, and reviewed Vincent's plan repeatedly until she could visualize every contingency. At 9:15, she received a text from an unknown number. "Everything is in place. Remember, let them believe they've won." She deleted the message, took a deep breath, and made her way to the boardroom. Outside the heavy oak doors, she paused, allowing herself one final moment of private rage before transforming her expression into one of weary resignation. When she pushed open the doors, 12 faces turned toward her. 11 board members and Harrison Blackwood, who couldn't hide the triumphant gleam in his eyes. Eleanor, Edward Klein stood, his silver hair and patrician features projecting grandfatherly concern that now seemed so obviously false. "Thank you for joining us. I understand you've had a busy morning." "I apologize for the delay, Edward," she replied, her voice deliberately lacking its usual confidence. "There were some matters that required my attention." She took her seat at the head of the table, noting the subtle exchanges of glances, the barely concealed smirks. They thought they were witnessing the beginning of her downfall. They had no idea they were watching the carefully choreographed opening moves of their own destruction. Edward cleared his throat. "As you know, we've called this special meeting to address some concerns about the company's direction under your leadership. Harrison has prepared a comprehensive presentation on Meridian's financial performance over the past 3 quarters. Harrison stood, straightening his expensive tie. Thank you, Edward." He turned to face the room, pointedly looking past Elena. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I regret to inform you that Meridian Enterprises is in a state of crisis." As he launched into his presentation, Elena kept her expression carefully neutral, knowing that somewhere in this room, hidden cameras were capturing every moment of the performance that was about to unfold. Harrison's presentation was a masterpiece of misdirection. With practiced concern, he walked the board through a series of charts and projections that painted Elena's leadership as dangerously incompetent. He highlighted the European expansion's stalled progress, the mysterious financial shortfalls from the Singapore division, and the company's declining market position, all problems that he and Edward had engineered. "As you can see," Harrison gestured to a particularly damning graph, "under Ms. Vega's leadership, our operating costs have increased by 22% while revenue has stagnated. This is simply unsustainable." Eleanor watched the faces around the table. Some board members looked genuinely concerned. Others, those likely in on the scheme, maintained expressions of grave disappointment. Edward Klein sat with his fingers steepled, the very picture of a concerned chairman forced to make difficult decisions. "The most troubling aspect," Harrison continued, clicking to a new slide, "is the Singapore situation. Despite repeated assurances from Ms. Vega that the division was thriving, our internal audit has uncovered significant discrepancies." From the corner of her eye, Elena noticed a subtle red light blinking beneath the boardroom table, one of Vincent's recording devices, she presumed. It gave her a surge of confidence. "These discrepancies," Harrison emphasized the word with evident distaste, "suggest either gross negligence or something more concerning. In either case, the board must take decisive action to protect Meridian's future." Edward cleared his throat. "Thank you, Harrison, for that thorough analysis." He turned toward Elena with practiced sympathy. "Elena, would you care to respond to these findings?" all eyes turned to her. This was the moment Vincent had prepared her for, the performance of her career. Elena straightened the papers in front of her, allowing her hands to tremble slightly. When she spoke, she carefully modulated her voice to sound defensive and slightly desperate. "These numbers don't tell the whole story," she began, avoiding direct eye contact with anyone. The European expansion faced unexpected regulatory hurdles that no one could have anticipated. As for Singapore, she hesitated, as if searching for an explanation that wouldn't come. "Elena," Edward's voice was gentle, patronizing. "We all understand that running a company of this size is challenging. No one is suggesting any impropriety on your part, merely that perhaps the burden of leadership has proved greater than anticipated." The condescension in his tone was so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "I've given everything to this company," Elena said quietly, injecting a hint of desperation into her voice. 3 years of my life, sacrificing everything, and we appreciate your dedication," Harrison interrupted smoothly. "But Meridian needs stable, experienced leadership to weather this crisis." Eleanor let her shoulders slump slightly. "What exactly are you proposing?" Edward and Harrison exchanged a quick glance that few would have noticed, but Elena caught it. The look of predators who sensed wounded prey. "The board believes," Edward began carefully, "that a change in executive leadership is necessary. Harrison has prepared a transition plan that would see you step down as CEO, with a generous severance package and consulting arrangement to ease the transition. You want me to resign?" Elena injected the perfect note of shock into her voice. "It would be the most dignified option," Edward confirmed, his expression sympathetic but his eyes cold. "The alternative would be a formal vote of no confidence, which would be messier for everyone involved." Elena allowed her face to crumple momentarily before composing herself. May I have a moment to process this?" "Of course." Edward nodded magnanimously. "Perhaps a brief recess." The boardroom door opened, and Vincent walked in, wearing his security consultant persona perfectly. Confident, professional, utterly belonging in this room of power brokers. Several board members looked up in confusion. "And I apologize for the interruption," Vincent said smoothly. "Ms. Vega, there's an urgent security matter requiring your attention." Edward frowned. "Who is this person?" "Elena." Elena stood, feigning irritation at the interruption. "Vincent Romano, a security consultant I brought in yesterday to address some concerns." "I'll handle this quickly." She followed Vincent out into the hallway, conscious of the curious and suspicious glances following them. Once the door closed behind them, Vincent led her several steps away, beyond earshot. "They took the bait," he said quietly. "Edward just texted Malcolm in IT to erase all evidence of the Singapore transactions from the server. Malcolm is one of ours. He's preserving everything while making it look like he's deleting files. Are we recording their conversations in there?" "Every word. As soon as I walk back in, I'll activate the final phase." He studied her face. "You were perfect, by the way. The right combination of defensive and defeated," Eleanor smiled grimly. "Years of watching men like Edward underestimate me finally paying off. What next?" "I'll enter first and take a position by the door. Wait exactly 30 seconds, then come in looking resolved but broken. Tell them you need to make a statement before formally responding to their proposal." Elena nodded. "And the evidence. Everything is being streamed to secure servers. Even if they somehow discovered our devices now, it's too late. Let's finish this," Elena said, her voice hardening. Vincent returned to the boardroom, while Elena counted to 30, preparing herself for the final act. When she re-entered, the conversation that had been buzzing around the table immediately ceased. She noted Vincent standing unobtrusively near the door, his presence barely acknowledged by the board members. "Thank you for your patience," Elena said, her voice now calm and steady. "Before I respond to the board's proposal, I'd like to make a brief statement." Edward nodded indulgently. "Of course, Elena." She took her seat at the head of the table, folded her hands, and looked directly at Edward. 3 years ago, when you approached me about taking the CEO position, you said you believed in my vision for Meridian. You said the company needed fresh perspectives, innovative thinking. I believed you." Edward's expression remained sympathetic, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "And I meant it. Elena, but business is business. Results matter. Yes, they do, Elena agreed. Results like the $42 million that have disappeared from our Singapore division over the past 14 months. The room went utterly still. Harrison's face drained of color. I don't know what you're implying, Edward said carefully, but if funds are missing, that only underscores our concerns about your leadership. Elena smiled thinly. That's interesting, because I have evidence that suggests you and Harrison have been systematically embezzling those funds through a network of shell companies, most notably through Blackstone Holdings in Malta. Harrison's water glass slipped from his fingers, spilling across the polished table. No one moved to clean it up. These are serious and defamatory accusations, Edward said, his voice dangerously low. Will I suggest you consider very carefully what you're saying, Elena? Oh, I have, Elena replied, her mask of defeat completely gone now. I've considered it with the help of extensive documentation, audio recordings, and transaction records. She nodded toward Vincent, who pressed a button on his phone. The boardroom's display screen suddenly came to life, showing an email from Edward to Harrison with the subject line, Singapore Extraction Timeline. What is this? Edward demanded, rising from his chair. Who authorized accessing my private communications? Perhaps, Elena said, her voice like ice, you should be less concerned about how I obtained this evidence and more concerned about the federal investigators who are currently reviewing copies of everything I'm about to show this board. The boardroom descended into chaos. Several directors leapt to their feet, shouting questions and demands simultaneously. Harrison sat frozen, his face ashen. Edward alone maintained his composure, though a muscle twitched dangerously in his jaw. This is absurd, Edward declared, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. Elena is clearly fabricating evidence to save her position. I move that we adjourn this meeting immediately and reconvene with legal counsel present. Actually, Vincent spoke for the first time, his voice commanding immediate attention. I would strongly advise against adjourning. The FBI has been notified of this situation, and agents are currently on their way to this building. Anyone attempting to leave before they arrive could face obstruction charges. Who the hell are you? Edward demanded, rounding on Vincent. Vincent Romano, former MI6 and private intelligence operative, Elena answered for him. The man who spent the last 17 months gathering evidence against your embezzlement scheme while working as a janitor in this building. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Barbara Chen, one of the board's longest-serving members, turned to Elena. You hired a spy disguised as a janitor. I didn't hire him, Elena clarified. He approached me last night with evidence of what was happening. Evidence I've now verified independently. Vincent tapped his phone again, and the screen changed to display a complex flowchart of shell companies and financial transactions. If I may, he addressed the board professionally, this diagram illustrates how funds were diverted from the Singapore division through a series of shell companies before ultimately reaching personal accounts controlled by Mr. Klein and Mr. Blackwood. The transactions were designed to appear as legitimate vendor payments and consulting fees, but when analyzed collectively, they reveal a clear pattern of systematic theft. This is preposterous, Edward declared, but his confident demeanor had begun to crack around the edges. You cannot possibly expect the board to believe the wild accusations of a janitor, former MI6, Vincent corrected mildly, and I don't expect you to take my word for it. That's why I've prepared this. He pressed another button, and the room's speakers crackled to life with Edward's own voice. Harrison, we need to accelerate the Singapore extraction. Elena's starting to ask questions about the Q3 numbers. Harrison's recorded voice replied, I've already moved another 4.2 million through the Malta account. We should be able to complete the full withdrawal before the annual audit. And you're certain it can't be traced back to us? Edward asked on the recording. Positive. The documentation shows Elena personally authorized all the transfers. When this blows up, she'll take the fall, not us. Edward's face had gone from pink with indignation to ghostly white. Harrison looked like he might vomit. That recording was taken 3 weeks ago at Mr. Klein's lake house. Vincent informed the stunned board members. "I have dozens more like it, along with email correspondence, bank records, and witness testimony from 2 employees you coerced into falsifying documents." Barbara Chen turned to Edward. Her expression hardened with disgust. "Edward, is this true?" Edward's attorney mask slipped back into place. "I will not dignify these fabricated allegations with a response. This is clearly a desperate attempt by Elena to salvage her failing career." "Then perhaps you'd like to explain this," Elena said, sliding tablets across the table to each board member. "These are the complete Singapore financial records. The real ones, not the doctored versions you've been providing to the board. You'll note that under my leadership, the division has actually been profitable every quarter. The losses," Harrison reported, "were manufactured specifically to undermine my position." The board members began scrolling through the documents, their expressions transitioning from confusion to shock to anger. "There's more," Vincent added, advancing to a new slide showing a photograph of Edward and Harrison meeting with a man in an expensive restaurant. "This was taken last month in Zurich. The third man is Anton Volkov, a known financial criminal with ties to money laundering operations throughout Eastern Europe. According to their conversation, which I recorded, they were finalizing arrangements to transfer the stolen Meridian funds to a more permanent offshore structure." Derek Powell, the board's most financially savvy member, looked up from his tablet, his face flushed with anger. "These Singapore numbers, if these are accurate, then everything we've been told for the past year has been a lie." "Precisely," Elena confirmed. "A carefully constructed lie designed to enrich Edward and Harrison while destroying my career and potentially the company itself." Edward slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous. I've given 30 years of my life to Meridian. I will not sit here and be accused by some glorified security guard and a CEO who's clearly out of her depth." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway, "you will sit there, Mr. Klein." Everyone turned to see 2 men and a woman in dark suits entering the boardroom, badges already displayed. "Special Agent Curtis, FBI," the lead agent introduced himself. "These are Agents Ramirez and Chen. We'd like everyone to remain seated while we secure this room." Edward's face contorted with rage. "You arranged this whole thing as a setup," he hissed at Elena. "You had no intention of addressing the board's legitimate concerns." "The board's concerns were manufactured by you," Elena replied calmly. "And yes, this was a setup to expose the real criminals in this room." Agent Curtis approached Edward and Harrison. "Mr. Klein, Mr. Blackwood, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding allegations of embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy." Harrison suddenly found his voice. "Wait, this wasn't my idea. Edward orchestrated everything. I just followed orders." Edward's head snapped toward Harrison, his expression one of pure betrayal. "You spineless—" "Mr. Blackwood," Agent Curtis interrupted, "you'll have plenty of opportunity to make a statement at our field office." As the agents led Edward and Harrison from the room, the remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Barbara Chen was the first to recover. "Elena," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "on behalf of the board, I want to extend our deepest apologies. It's clear we've been misled about the company's performance under your leadership." "Misled is an understatement," Derek Powell added, still scrolling through the financial data. According to these figures, Elena's European expansion strategy would have been wildly successful if Edward and Harrison hadn't been deliberately sabotaging it. Elena maintained her professional demeanor, though inside she was experiencing a powerful mix of vindication and exhaustion. "I appreciate that, Barbara, Derek, but right now, our priority needs to be stabilizing the company and reassuring our shareholders once this becomes public." "Agreed," Barbara nodded. "I move that we formally reaffirm our confidence in Elena as CEO and establish an independent committee to oversee the recovery of the stolen funds." "Seconded," Derek said immediately. The remaining board members voiced their agreement one by one, many still looking shell-shocked by the morning's revelations. "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. "Vincent has prepared a crisis management strategy that I'd like to implement immediately, with the board's approval." She gestured to Vincent, who stepped forward, no longer the invisible janitor, but a commanding presence whose expertise was now beyond question. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. While FBI agents combed through Meridian's offices, securing computers and files, Elena and Vincent worked with the board to implement an emergency response plan. The company's stock would inevitably take a hit when news of the embezzlement broke, but with proper management, the damage could be contained. By late afternoon, Elena had conducted 3 emergency meetings with Meridian's executive team, minus Harrison's, of course, and established a temporary financial oversight committee led by Derek Powell. Vincent had coordinated with the FBI, providing access to all the evidence he'd gathered during his months of covert investigation. At 7:30 p.m., long after most of the staff had left for the day, Elena finally returned to her office to find Vincent waiting for her. His tie loosened, jacket draped over a chair. "The press release is ready," he informed her as she closed the door. "Straightforward and factual. We're framing it as Meridian uncovers financial irregularities, cooperates with authorities, leadership remains strong." Elena nodded, kicking off her heels and collapsing into her chair. "The board approved it unanimously. We'll release it at 6 a.m. tomorrow, before the markets open." "Perfect timing. The FBI has agreed to coordinate their public statement with our release." Vincent handed her a glass of water. "You should eat something. It's been nearly 12 hours since breakfast." "Food is the last thing on my mind right now," Elena said, though she accepted the water gratefully. "I keep thinking about Edward, 30 years at Meridian, mentoring dozens of executives, including me. All that time, was he just waiting for the right opportunity to exploit the company, or did something change him?" Vincent leaned against her desk, his posture more relaxed now that they were alone. "In my experience, people like Edward don't change so much as reveal themselves when the right circumstances arise. The opportunity to steal $42 million would tempt even the most upstanding person." "Not everyone," Elena countered, studying him over the rim of her glass. "You had access to sensitive information for 17 months. You could have used it for blackmail or personal gain." "Who says I'm not?" Vincent's lips curved into a slight smile. "I did negotiate a percentage of the recovered funds, a legitimate finder's fee for services rendered," Elena pointed out. "Not quite the same as embezzlement." "True enough." Vincent glanced at his watch. "The FBI should be finishing up with Edward and Harrison's residences by now. Agent Curtis promised to call with any significant findings." As if on cue, Elena's phone rang. She put it on speaker. "Ms. Vega, this is Agent Curtis. We've completed the initial search of Klein's residence and found something I think you should know about immediately." "Go ahead, Agent." "We discovered detailed dossiers on several Meridian executives, including yourself. These weren't just professional backgrounds, they contained highly personal information. Medical records, financial statements, even surveillance photos of family members." Elena felt a chill run through her. "What are you saying?" "It appears Mr. Klein was gathering compromising information on key personnel. Based on notes we found with the files, he was planning to use this material to force cooperation or silence if his financial scheme was discovered." Elena met Vincent's eyes across the desk, seeing her own shock mirrored there. "There's more," Agent Curtis continued. "We found evidence suggesting that Mr. Klein may have been involved in similar schemes at his previous companies. We're reaching out to those organizations now." "Thank you, Agent Curtis. Please keep me informed of any other developments." After ending the call, Elena sat in stunned silence. "He had files on me, on my personal life. It's a common tactic," Vincent said quietly. "Gather leverage on potential threats before they become actual threats." Elena shook her head. "All those times he asked about my family, my health. He wasn't being paternal. He was collecting ammunition. Most likely." She looked up at him, a troubling thought forming. "Vincent, how much do you know about me, about my personal life?" He held her gaze steadily. "More than I should. Less than Edward. It was necessary for the operation to understand who I was protecting." "And what exactly did you learn?" Vincent hesitated. then answered with measured honesty. I know about your sister's struggle with addiction, your mother's early onset dementia, your divorce 3 years ago, the fact that you've been quietly paying for your ex-husband's medical treatments despite the way he betrayed you. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Each revelation felt like a small invasion, even though she understood the professional necessity behind it. I never accessed your medical records or financial accounts, Vincent added. There are lines I don't cross, even for an operation. How comforting, Elena said dryly, though without real anger. After a moment, she sighed. I suppose I should be grateful you're on my side. I am, he confirmed simply. A knock at the door interrupted them. Barbara Chen entered, looking tired but resolute. The legal team just finished their preliminary assessment, she reported. They believe we can recover at least 30 million of the stolen funds. The rest is likely gone, lost in transaction fees, or hidden too deeply to trace quickly. 30 million is better than nothing, Elena acknowledged. There's something else, Barbara continued, her expression grave. The team discovered that Edward had been systematically blocking acquisition offers for Meridian, offers that would have been highly favorable to shareholders. It seems he was afraid new ownership would bring in financial auditors who might discover his scheme. So he wasn't just stealing from the company, Elena realized. He was actively preventing its growth to cover his tracks. Precisely. One offer in particular, from Axion Technologies last year, would have increased shareholder value by nearly 40%. After Barbara left, Elena turned to Vincent. What happens now with you? I mean, operation complete, bad guys caught, day saved. Do you just disappear back into the shadows? Vincent considered her question. Usually, yes. This particular assignment has reached its natural conclusion. And the head of security position you mentioned? A convenient cover story. Most of my work is short-term. Elena leaned forward, studying him intently. What if it wasn't just a cover? Meridian clearly needs someone with your skills. Our current security team missed a $42 million theft happening right under their noses. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a permanent position? I'm considering it, Elena replied. You already know the company inside and out. You've proven your capabilities. And frankly, after everything that's happened, I could use someone I can actually trust. Trust is a strong word for someone you've known for less than 24 hours. Perhaps, Elena acknowledged, but in those 24 hours, you've shown more loyalty to Meridian than my mentor did in 30 years. Vincent's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or intrigue. Think about it, Elena continued. A legitimate position, competitive salary, no more sleeping in service closets or emptying trash bins. I never actually slept in closets, Vincent corrected with the hint of a smile. I had an apartment. The janitor role was just my cover within the building. Even so, Elena persisted, the offer stands. Morning arrived with the anticipated media storm. The press release went out at 6:00 a.m. as planned, followed by the FBI's official statement 30 minutes later. By 7:00 a.m., financial news networks were running constant coverage of the Meridian scandal, complete with unflattering archive photos of Edward and Harrison, alongside stock footage of FBI agents carrying boxes from corporate offices. Elena watched from her desk, sipping her third cup of coffee. The company's stock had dropped 11% in pre-market trading, significant but not catastrophic. The carefully crafted narrative of Elena uncovering the fraud and taking decisive action was helping to contain the damage. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Turn to Channel 4. She switched to the local news station just in time to see Edward Klein being escorted from his home in handcuffs, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his expression thunderous. The caption read, Former Meridian Chairman Edward Klein charged with embezzlement, wire fraud. A knock at her door drew her attention. Vincent entered, freshly showered and wearing a suit that was definitely not from his janitor's wardrobe. Good morning, he said, closing the door behind him. I see you've been watching the coverage. It's surreal, Elena admitted. Yesterday morning, Edward was my mentor and chairman. Now he's being paraded in handcuffs for the morning news. The mighty fall harder than most, Vincent observed. taking a seat across from her. "Ade, how are you holding up? Honestly, I haven't had time to process any of this emotionally. It's been all crisis management since the moment the FBI walked into that boardroom. That's probably for the best. Compartmentalization is a useful skill in situations like this." Elena studied him over her coffee cup. "You seem particularly fresh this morning. I'm guessing you've made a decision about my offer." "I have," Vincent confirmed, "and I'd like to accept the position with a few conditions." "I'm listening." "First, I need complete autonomy over security operations. No interference from other departments, no bureaucratic hurdles." Elena nodded. "Reasonable, given the circumstances." "Second, I want to conduct a thorough security audit, not just digital systems, but physical premises, personnel protocols, everything. Based on what I've already observed, there are significant vulnerabilities beyond what Edward and Harrison exploited." "Also reasonable." "Third," Vincent continued, his expression becoming more serious, "I need full transparency from you. No secrets, no hidden agendas. If I'm going to protect Meridian effectively, I can't be working with partial information." Elena set down her cup. "That goes both ways, Vincent. I need to know I can trust you completely." "Fair enough," he extended his hand. "Then we have a deal." They shook, the gesture feeling weightier than a typical business agreement. "Now," Vincent said, shifting smoothly to business, "we need to discuss today's shareholder call. They'll have questions we need to be prepared for." "Already ahead of you," Elena replied, sliding a folder across her desk. "Talking points, anticipated questions, financial projections showing how we'll recover from this. The board has reviewed and approved everything." Vincent flipped through the documents. "Impressed. You've been busy." "I haven't slept," Elena admitted. "Too much adrenaline, too many thoughts. It felt better to channel it into something productive." Before Vincent could respond, Elena's assistant buzzed through on the intercom. "Ms. Vega, Director Powell is here with the preliminary forensic accounting report. Send him in." Derek Powell entered, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of the same sleepless night Elena had experienced. He was carrying a thick binder and a troubled expression. "It's worse than we thought," he said without preamble, placing the binder on Elena's desk. "The forensic team worked through the night. They've traced the full extent of the embezzlement scheme, and it goes back much further than 14 months. Elena and Vincent exchanged concerned glances. "How much further?" Elena asked. 3 years, Derek replied grimly. "Almost to the day you were appointed CEO." Elena felt as if she'd been punched. 3 years? That's my entire tenure, yes. "And here's where it gets more disturbing," Derek continued, opening the binder to a flagged page. "The scheme actually began before you were appointed. The financial team found evidence that Edward was setting up the shell company structure approximately 6 weeks before he nominated you for the CEO position." The implication hung in the air, clear and devastating. "He selected me specifically for this," Elena said, her voice hollow. "My entire career at Meridian, everything I've worked for, was engineered as part of his fraud." "That's one interpretation," Derek acknowledged, "but there's another angle to consider. Even with the embezzlement, Meridian has grown under your leadership. Our market position is stronger. Our product development pipeline is robust. Edward may have chosen you as a potential scapegoat, but you've proven to be a genuinely effective CEO despite his sabotage." Elena absorbed this, trying to find the balance between feeling used and recognizing her own legitimate accomplishments. "There's more," Derek added, turning to another section of the report. "We've discovered that Harrison was skimming from the embezzled funds without Edward's knowledge. He was running a secondary scheme, siphoning approximately $6 million that Edward believed was going to their shared accounts." Vincent laughed softly. "Honor among thieves. The FBI needs to know about this immediately," Elena said. "It could be valuable leverage. If Harrison realizes we know he was stealing from Edward, he might be more willing to provide additional evidence against Klein in exchange for consideration in his own case." "Already handled," Derek assured her. "I called Agent Curtis on my way up. They're adjusting their interrogation strategy accordingly." After Derek left, Elena stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city skyline. 3 years, she said quietly. "My entire career as CEO has been built on a foundation of lies." Vincent moved to stand beside her. "No, Your career has been built on your abilities. Edward's scheme was built on lies. There's a crucial difference, is there? Everything I've achieved has been tainted by this. How can I face the shareholders knowing I was handpicked as a patsy? You face them as the CEO who uncovered a massive fraud and took immediate action to protect the company, Vincent said firmly. Edward's motivations for promoting you are irrelevant now. What matters is what you do with the position. Elena turned to him, struck by the conviction in his voice. You sound like you actually believe that. I do. In my line of work, I've learned that intentions matter far less than actions. Whatever Edward intended, you've proven to be an exceptional leader. She studied his face, searching for signs of insincerity but finding none. Thank you, she said finally. That helps. The shareholder call was scheduled for 11 a.m. Elena spent the hour beforehand in her office with Vincent and the crisis management team, reviewing strategies and anticipating the most challenging questions they might face. By 10:45, the virtual meeting room was already filling with shareholders, their profile images appearing one by one on the large conference screen. Remember, Vincent said quietly as they prepared to begin, the shareholders want stability more than anything. They need to believe you're in control of the situation. Elena nodded, taking a deep breath. I am in control. At precisely 11 times, she activated her camera and microphone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this emergency call. As you're all aware, Meridian has uncovered a significant financial fraud perpetrated by our former chairman, Edward Klein, and CFO, Harrison Blackwood. I want to address your concerns directly and outline our path forward. For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor delivered a masterful presentation. She was transparent about the fraud without revealing details that might compromise the ongoing investigation, acknowledged the short-term market impact, and presented a clear recovery strategy. Throughout it all, her voice remained steady, authoritative, and confident, showing no hint of the emotional turmoil she'd experienced upon learning of Edward's true motives for her appointment. When she opened the floor for questions, the first came from Meridian's largest institutional investor, Mrs. Vega. While we appreciate your swift action once the fraud was discovered, the fact remains that this occurred under your leadership. How can shareholders be confident in your ability to prevent similar issues going forward? It was the question they'd anticipated, the one designed to undermine her authority. Vincent watched Eleanor closely, curious to see how she would handle it. That's an excellent question, Mr. Donovan, Elena replied without hesitation. This fraud was sophisticated, deliberately concealed, and involved our most senior financial officer along with our chairman, the very people traditionally responsible for financial oversight. Nevertheless, I take full responsibility for not identifying it sooner. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. Indeed, as for preventive measures, I've already implemented a comprehensive security overhaul under our new Chief Security Officer, Vincent Romano, whose background includes MI6 and specialized work in corporate fraud detection. Additionally, we've established an independent financial oversight committee reporting directly to the board, and we're implementing advanced transaction monitoring systems across all divisions. Vincent was impressed. She'd taken ownership without accepting blame, presented concrete solutions, and positioned his appointment as a strength rather than an admission of past weakness. The call continued for another 40 minutes, with questions growing increasingly technical as shareholders shifted from shock to practical concerns about recovery. By the time Elena concluded the meeting, the company's stock had actually rebounded 2 percentage points from its morning low, a small but significant vote of confidence. You were brilliant, Vincent told her as the crisis team filed out of her office. The perfect balance of accountability and leadership. I had good coaching, Elena replied, the tension in her shoulders finally easing, and motivation. I refused to let Edward's actions define my legacy at Meridian. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text. He checked it, his expression shifting subtly. What is it? Elena asked. Agent Curtis. They've completed their search of Harrison's vacation property in Vermont. They found something interesting, a safe containing what appears to be a secondary set of records related to the embezzlement scheme. That doesn't sound surprising. Harrison struck me as the type to keep insurance. It's not the existence of the records that's interesting, Vincent clarified. It's what they contain. According to Curtis, they reference payments to someone inside Meridian with the code name Watchman, someone who isn't Edward or Harrison. Elena's momentary relief evaporated. A third conspirator. Here at Meridian, it appears so. The payments were substantial, $50,000 monthly for the past 2 years. That's over $1 million. Elena calculated quickly. Who could it be? The records don't specify, just the code name and payment amounts. Elena began pacing her office. It has to be someone with significant access, a department head or executive who could facilitate the fraud or conceal evidence, or security personnel, Vincent added grimly. The name Watchman suggests someone whose job involved monitoring or oversight. Malcolm in IT, Elena suggested, referencing the staff member they'd mentioned during their boardroom sting. Vincent shook his head. Malcolm was genuinely horrified when I approached him about the fraud. His reaction couldn't have been faked. Besides, he helped us gather evidence against Edward and Harrison. We need to identify this person quickly, Elena said. And if they're still in the company, they could be destroying evidence or interfering with the investigation as we speak. I agree, but we need to be careful about how we proceed. If Watchman realizes we're looking for them, they might accelerate whatever damage they're planning. Elena stopped pacing and turned to face Vincent. You were able to operate covertly as a janitor for 17 months. Could you do something similar to identify our mystery conspirator? Possibly, but not as a janitor. That cover is blown now that everyone knows my real background. I'd need a different approach. Vincent thought for a moment. Actually, I may have a better idea. Rather than hunting for watchmen, we make watchmen come to us. How? By creating the impression that Edward has hidden assets that only watchmen can access. If they believe there's money waiting for them, they might make a move. Elena nodded slowly. A trap, exactly. With your permission, I'd like to work with the FBI to plant information suggesting that Edward maintained a separate contingency fund, one that Harrison didn't know about, accessible only with specific codes that he would have shared with his most trusted associate. And when Watchman attempts to access this non-existent fund, we identify them. Vincent finished. Do it, Elena authorized, but keep me informed of every step. If this third conspirator is someone within my executive team, I need to know immediately. Vincent stood to leave, but paused at the door. Elena, you should be prepared for the possibility that Watchman could be someone you trust, someone close to you professionally. She met his gaze, her expression hardening. After Edward, I'm prepared for any betrayal. As Vincent left her office, Elena returned to the window, staring out at the city. Just when she thought she'd contained the damage, a new threat had emerged. One potentially still operating within her company's walls. She'd trusted Edward completely, and he'd been planning to destroy her from the very beginning. Now she had to wonder who else among her colleagues was wearing a mask. Vincent moved quickly to implement the trap for Watchman. Working with Agent Curtis, he crafted a convincing narrative about Edward's hidden contingency fund, a final insurance policy supposedly containing $3 million in untraceable cryptocurrency. The bait was carefully planted. First, a staged conversation between two FBI agents in Meridian's lobby, deliberately loud enough to be overheard by security cameras and any passing employees. Next, a digital trail, emails on Edward's seized devices referencing the fund, left accessible to anyone with administrative access to Meridian's backup servers. Finally, a falsified bank document accidentally left visible on an FBI laptop during interviews with Meridian's financial staff. 3 days passed, with no sign of Watchman taking the bait. Elena maintained her usual schedule, leading the company through the turbulent aftermath of the scandal while privately monitoring Vincent's operation. Meridian's stock had stabilized, and the initial media frenzy was beginning to subside, replaced by more detailed analysis of corporate governance failures and financial oversight. On the 4th day, Elena called Vincent to her office. "Nothing yet?" she asked, as soon as he closed the door. "Not directly," Vincent replied, "but there's been activity. Someone accessed the backup server logs twice yesterday, specifically looking at Edward's email archives. Could it have been the FBI or our own IT staff? No, the access came from within Meridian, but used credentials that shouldn't have had that level of authorization. Whoever it was knows how to cover their tracks. They routed through multiple internal systems to obscure their original access point. Elena frowned. So, Watchman took the first bite, but hasn't moved on the bait yet. They're being cautious, Vincent agreed. Smart, considering what happened to Edward and Harrison. Do we have any suspects? Vincent placed a tablet on her desk displaying a list of 15 names. These are the only Meridian employees with the technical skill, security clearance, and access necessary to facilitate the embezzlement scheme over the past 3 years. Elena scanned the list, her expression darkening. James Willis, my Chief of Staff, Diane Patel, General Counsel, Marcus Chen, Head of Internal Audit. She looked up at Vincent. These are people I work with every day, people I trust explicitly. I know, Vincent said quietly. That's what makes this situation particularly difficult. Watchman has to be someone with significant access and influence, someone above suspicion. How do we narrow it down? We're monitoring all 15, tracking their digital footprints, observing behavioral patterns, and I've added another element to our trap. Vincent tapped the tablet, bringing up a document. I've created a specific digital key that supposedly unlocks Edward's cryptocurrency wallet. It's embedded in an encrypted file that appears to be part of Edward's personal records. The only way to access it is through a specific terminal in the secure server room on the 47th floor. And when someone attempts to use that terminal, we'll have them, Vincent confirmed. I've installed discrete cameras and a fingerprint recorder on the keyboard. The moment anyone tries to access that file, we'll know exactly who Watchman is. Elena sat back, processing this information. In the meantime, I'm supposed to continue working alongside people who might be actively undermining me and the company. Unfortunately, or yes, if we start treating any of these 15 differently, Watchmen might realize we're onto them. Vincent hesitated before adding, this is the hardest part of counterintelligence work, maintaining normalcy when you know there's a threat, sometimes literally sitting across the table from you. Elena's phone rang. Her executive assistant, Ms. Vega, your 3 p.m. meeting with the executive committee is ready to start. Thank you, Sarah. I'll be right there. She ended the call and stood, straightening her jacket. That's a meeting with 6 people on your list. Remember, Vincent advised, the best defense is to give away nothing. Treat everyone exactly as you normally would. I've had practice lately, Elena said with grim humor. And after all, I spent 3 years treating Edward like a trusted mentor while he was plotting my downfall. The executive committee meeting was excruciating. Elena found herself studying each face around the table, searching for signs of deception. James Willis, her chief of staff, who had been with her since day one, was his loyalty genuine or an elaborate performance? Diane Patel, whose legal advice she had relied upon countless times, had she been deliberately steering Meridian into vulnerable positions? Marcus Chen, whose audit reports had repeatedly failed to detect the embezzlement, incompetence, or complicity. Despite the internal turmoil, Elena conducted the meeting flawlessly, discussing recovery strategies and new security protocols without a hint of her suspicion. As the executives filed out afterward, she caught James lingering behind. Elena, he said, once they were alone, are you all right? You seem tense. Just tired, she replied with a practiced smile. It's been a challenging week, James nodded sympathetically. You've handled it remarkably well. The team is behind you 100%. You know that, right? I appreciate that, James. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. That's what I'm here for. His concern seemed genuine, his eyes direct and sincere. Was this the real James, or was Watchman a skilled actor playing the role of the supportive lieutenant? Actually, Elena said, making a split-second decision, there is something. I'd like you to work with Vincent on reviewing the executive security protocols. Given everything that's happened, I want to ensure our most sensitive operations are properly protected. Of course, James agreed readily. I'll connect with him this afternoon. After he left, Elena texted Vincent, Just assign James to work with you on executive security protocols. Watch him closely. The response came immediately. Good move. We'll use the opportunity to observe. Stay vigilant. That evening, Elena worked late again, finding it difficult to leave the office while knowing a traitor still lurked within Meridian. Around 9:30 p.m., her phone buzzed with an alert from Vincent. Activity at the 47th floor terminal. Someone's accessing the bait file now. Elena's heart raced. On my way, she texted back, grabbing her jacket. She took the executive elevator to the 47th floor, her mind cycling through the possibilities. Who would she find? Which trusted colleague was about to be unmasked as watchman? Elena moved silently through the dimly lit corridor of the 47th floor. The secure server room was at the far end, its reinforced door usually locked with biometric security. Tonight, Vincent had deliberately left it functioning but unsecured, another element of their trap. As she approached, she could see Vincent waiting in the shadows near the server room entrance. He held a finger to his lips, then pointed inside. Through the glass panel in the door, Elena could see a figure hunched over the terminal, typing rapidly. The blue glow of the monitor illuminated the person's face. Diane Patel, Meridian's general counsel. Elena felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. Diane had been with Meridian for over a decade, longer than Elena herself. She had guided the company through countless legal challenges, always projecting unwavering integrity. She had been one of Elena's strongest supporters during the early difficult days of her CEO tenure, or so it had seemed. Vincent gestured for Elena to stay back as he silently approached the door. He had positioned FBI agents throughout the building, ready to move on his signal. With deliberate calm, he pushed open the door. Working late, Ms. Patel, he asked conversationally. Diane's head snapped up, her expression momentarily stunned before shifting into practiced professional composure. Mr. Romano. Yes, just reviewing some case files related to the Klein situation. On a secured terminal in the server room, Vincent approached slowly, his movements casual, but his eyes sharply focused. That's an interesting choice of workspace. Diane closed whatever she had been viewing, but not before Vincent noted the encryption program running on the screen. I needed access to certain protected files, attorney-client privilege materials related to Edward's previous legal matters with the company. I see, Vincent said, moving to stand beside her. And does attorney-client privilege typically involve accessing cryptocurrency wallets? The color drained from Diane's face, but she maintained her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Vincent replied softly. Watchman. At that word, Diane's professional mask cracked. Her eyes darted to the door where Elena now stood, her expression hardening into something cold and unfamiliar. Elena, Diane acknowledged, her voice strangely calm. I suppose I should have expected this. Why? The single word was all Elena could manage, the betrayal cutting deep. Diane straightened in her chair, smoothing her skirt in a reflexive gesture. Why does anyone do anything? Money, power, security. You had all of those things already, Elena countered, stepping into the room. You were one of our highest paid executives. You had the board's complete trust. I had a ceiling, Diane corrected sharply. A glass ceiling that not even you managed to break. Elena, you were just the token they needed, the perfect demographic package to make Meridian look progressive, while the real power remained exactly where it's always been. With Edward, Elena said, understanding dawning. You and Edward were in this together from the beginning. Edward recognized my value when no one else did, Diane confirmed, a hint of pride entering her voice. He knew the board would never make a woman chairman, especially not one who'd started as corporate counsel. But he offered me something better, true partnership, financial independence beyond anything a Meridian salary could provide. Vincent had been silently texting on his phone. Now he slipped it into his pocket. The FBI will be here momentarily. Ms. Patel, I'd suggest cooperating fully. It might improve your situation. Diane laughed, the sound brittle and hollow. My situation? I've been general counsel for 12 years. Mr. Romano, do you know how many legal loopholes I've documented? How many corporate skeletons I've personally buried? Trust me when I say there's very little evidence connecting me to Edward's activities. Except for the watchman payments. Elena pointed out. Harrison kept detailed records. Harrison kept records of payments to a code name, Diane corrected. No judge would consider that definitive evidence, and any competent defense attorney would argue that those records could have been created by Harrison himself to implicate an innocent third party. Elena studied the woman she'd considered a mentor and ally. You were helping me prepare a legal strategy against Edward just yesterday. Was that all an act? Not entirely, Diane admitted. I do admire your resilience, Elena. When Edward first proposed you as CEO, I thought you'd break within 6 months. But you surprised us both. You're actually quite good at this job, which made you an ideal distraction while we work. Vincent moved closer to the terminal. You accessed the bait file, Ms. Patel. That action was recorded and time-stamped. Your fingerprints are on the keyboard. That's evidence that will be difficult to explain away. Diane's confident expression faltered slightly. Accessing a file isn't illegal. I could claim I was conducting my own investigation as general counsel. Perhaps, Vincent conceded, but combined with the Watchman payments and whatever else we find, once we start digging into your personal finances, it creates a compelling pattern. The sound of the elevator arriving broke the tense silence. Agent Curtis and 2 other FBI agents appeared in the doorway. Diane Patel, Agent Curtis confirmed, though it was clearly a formality. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding your involvement in the Meridian embezzlement scheme. Diane stood, straightening her jacket with the same professional poise she'd displayed in countless board meetings. I'll cooperate fully, of course, she said smoothly. But I will be calling my attorney first. As the agents escorted her out, Diane paused beside Elena. He never would have succeeded without me, you know, she said quietly. I was the one who found the regulatory loopholes. I was the one who structured the transfers to avoid detection. Edward had the connections, but I had the expertise. And now you have neither, Elena replied coldly. After Diane was gone, Elena sank into the chair at the terminal, the weight of this latest betrayal settling heavily on her shoulders. I consulted her on everything, she said quietly. Legal strategy, executive decisions, personnel matters. How much damage has she done that we don't even know about yet? Vincent began securing the terminal, preserving the digital evidence of Diane's activities. She was well positioned to sabotage investigations, misinterpret regulations, and steer the company into vulnerable legal positions. We'll need to review every major legal decision and settlement from the past 3 years. It never ends, does it? Elena sighed. First Edward and Harrison, now Diane. How many more betrayals are waiting to be discovered? Probably none on this scale, Vincent assured her. The financial evidence suggests these 3 were the primary conspirators. The fact that they needed Diane's legal expertise indicates they couldn't trust anyone else with the full scope of their scheme. Elena nodded, drawing a small measure of comfort from his assessment. We need to inform the board immediately. With our general counsel under FBI investigation, we're legally exposed on multiple fronts. Already arranged, Vincent said. Barbara Chen has been notified and is assembling an emergency board call for 7 a.m. I've also contacted Meridian's outside counsel to step in temporarily. For the first time, Elena felt a genuine smile form. You're remarkably efficient, Mr. Romano. Just doing my job, Ms. Vega. 6 weeks after Diane Patel's arrest, Meridian Enterprises hosted a shareholders' meeting unlike any in its 70-year history. The company's stock had not only recovered from the initial scandal, but had surpassed its previous valuation by nearly 8%. The financial press was calling it the Vega Restoration, a corporate turnaround executed with remarkable precision and transparency. Elena stood at the podium, addressing a room filled with investors who had gone from questioning her leadership to applauding it. She had just finished presenting Meridian's new governance structure, complete with enhanced oversight mechanisms and an independent ethics committee with real authority. In conclusion, she said, her voice steady and confident, the events of the past few months have tested this company in unprecedented ways, but Meridian has emerged stronger, more transparent, and better positioned for sustainable growth. We've recovered 38 million of the embezzled funds, implemented industry-leading security protocols, and rebuilt our executive team with leaders committed to both excellence and integrity. As the audience applauded, Elena glanced to the side of the stage where Vincent stood, almost invisible, despite his tailored suit and commanding presence, a professional habit he hadn't entirely abandoned. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Over the past 6 weeks, he had transformed Meridian's security infrastructure while helping Elena navigate the treacherous waters of corporate reconstruction. After the presentation, as shareholders mingled during the reception, Barbara Chen approached Elena, champagne flute in hand. "Remarkable turnaround," the board member commented. "When we discovered Edward's betrayal, I honestly feared Meridian might not survive intact. The company was always stronger than Edward gave it credit for," Elena replied. "He saw it as a personal piggy bank. I see it as an institution worth protecting." "Speaking of protection," Barbara nodded toward Vincent, who was engaged in quiet conversation with Derek Powell across the room. "Your unorthodox hiring decision has paid off spectacularly. The board was skeptical about bringing in someone with his unusual background. Sometimes, the most valuable perspectives come from unexpected places," Elena said. "Vincent saw vulnerabilities in our systems that traditional security experts missed precisely because he approached the problem differently." "Indeed." Barbara sipped her champagne thoughtfully. "The federal prosecutor called me yesterday. Diane has finally agreed to a plea deal. She's providing evidence against Edward in exchange for a reduced sentence." "And Harrison, still trying to blame everyone but himself," Barbara said with a dry chuckle. "His strategy isn't working particularly well for him." After the reception concluded, Elena returned to her office to find Vincent waiting, a tablet in hand. "Congratulations," he said as she closed the door. "The shareholders are clearly impressed. They should be. We've given them plenty to be impressed about." Elena slipped off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Any updates on the recovery effort?" "Actually, yeah," Vincent handed her the tablet. "Our team just traced another 2.7 million through a previously undiscovered account in the Cayman. That brings our total recovery to nearly 41 million. Almost the full amount," Elena mused, scanning the report. "Not bad for 6 weeks' work. There's something else," Vincent added, his tone shifting slightly. "I've completed my initial contract with Meridian. The security overhaul is implemented. The leadership team vetted. The recovery operation nearly complete." Elena looked up sharply. "Are you giving notice?" "I'm suggesting we renegotiate terms," Vincent clarified. "The emergency situation has been resolved. Now you need to consider whether a former spy with a penchant for covert operations is really the right fit for Meridian's long-term security needs." Elena set the tablet aside, studying him carefully. "Having doubts about corporate life already?" "Not doubts," Vincent said thoughtfully, "just awareness of the transition. Emergency response is my specialty. Corporate maintenance is different." "Different doesn't mean unsuitable," Elena countered. She moved to the window, gazing out at the skyline now bathed in sunset. "When you first approached me as Victor the janitor, you said you chose me. Why?" Vincent considered the question carefully. "Professional curiosity, initially. The financial discrepancies were a puzzle that intrigued me. But as I observed you over those months, I saw someone genuinely committed to building something worthwhile. Not just profit, but purpose. That's surprisingly rare in corporate leadership." "And now," Elena asked, turning back to face him, "has your assessment changed?" "It's been reinforced," he replied simply. "You could have used the crisis to consolidate power, to build a narrative casting yourself as the heroic victim. Instead, you focused on strengthening the company's foundations, even when it meant limiting your own authority." Elena smiled slightly. "You make me sound nobler than I am. I simply did what was necessary." "Precisely." Vincent's expression remained serious. "Most people in your position would have done what was expedient, not what was necessary. That's the difference." A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that emerges only after shared battles and hard-won victories. "I'd like you to stay," Elena said finally, "not just as chief security officer, but as a strategic advisor. Meridian still faces challenges. Market competitors, technological disruption, internal resistance to change. I could use someone with your particular skill set to help navigate those waters." "That sounds suspiciously like a promotion," Vincent observed. "It is," Elena confirmed, "with appropriate compensation adjustment. Of course, I'll consider it." Vincent said, though his tone suggested he'd already made his decision. On one condition, which is no more secrets between us, he said, his expression unusually earnest. And if I'm going to be your advisor, I need to know everything, the good, the bad, and the politically inconvenient. No compartmentalization, no need-to-know basis. Elena nodded slowly. Complete transparency. I can agree to that. Then you have yourself an advisor, Ms. Vega. Excellent, Mr. Romano. She extended her hand, and they shook on their new arrangement, both aware of the uncommon trust they'd established in such a short time. As Vincent prepared to leave, Elena added, one more thing. The board is hosting a dinner tomorrow evening to celebrate our successful recovery. As my strategic advisor, your presence would be appropriate. A formal corporate dinner? Vincent raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerously close to conventional employment. Consider it reconnaissance, Elena suggested with a hint of humor. The corporate ecosystem is full of predators and prey, alliances and betrayals, not so different from your previous work, really. When you put it that way, Vincent conceded with the ghost of a smile. How could I possibly refuse? After he left, Elena returned to the window, watching as the city's lights came to life against the darkening sky. 6 weeks ago, she had discovered that her entire career had been built on a foundation of lies, that she had been selected as CEO specifically to be a scapegoat for Edward's crimes. The revelation could have destroyed her confidence, her ambition, her trust in her own abilities. Instead, it had liberated her. Edward had chosen her because he believed she would be controllable, expendable. He had been catastrophically wrong. And now, with the company firmly under her leadership and a team she could finally trust, Elena Vega was ready to build Meridian into something Edward Klein could never have imagined. Something authentic, sustainable, and genuinely visionary. The janitor, with the extraordinary resume, had changed everything, and for that, she was profoundly grateful.